So, welcome to the sixth session of the seminar series on autonomous mobility and the future of transportation, or Ciclo de Charlas, Movilidad Autónoma y el Futuro del Transporte, as its original name in Spanish. Today, we are happy to announce that this seminar is also a side event of the EcoMotion 2020, a virtual event that is gathering the smart mobility community through online meetings and talks held along this week. You can check for more information about this event at ecomotionweek.com. My name is Richard Mix. I'm a consultant at the Inter-American Development Bank in Chile, and today I will be the moderator of this session. To start, I will briefly mention the instructions and the program for today. So first, keep the microphones and cameras turned off. At the end of this session, we will have a round of questions and answers from the public. So please send us your questions through the chat. Third, please include your name and institution in your question so that we can mention it when we share the questions to the speakers. Regarding the program, we have the following. First, we'll have an opening talk by our representative from the Inter-American Development Bank in Chile. Second, we'll have a presentation coming from the Ministry of Transportation and Telecommunications of Chile. Third, we'll have the specialist talk by the CIO of Transdev North America. And fourth, we'll have the presentation of the Autonomous Mobility Challenge. Lastly, the round of questions from the public. Now, let's start with the opening talk by Yolanda Martinez, country representative of the Inter-American Development Bank in Chile. Yolanda, welcome to the session.
Hi, good morning, everyone. We're so happy to be part of this EcoMotion event. The Inter-American Development Bank is a lending source of Latin American and the Caribbean. We focus our work in providing cutting-edge research, policy advice, technical assistance to our member countries. The IDB Lab is our innovation laboratory within the IDB group, and the purpose of IDB is to drive innovation and inclusion through the use of emerging tech solutions focused on social good. We're very happy today to present to you our hub for autonomous vehicles in the region. This is a multi-sector effort between IDB Public Sector Branch, IDB Lab, the Ministry of Public Transport and Telecommunication in Chile, Transdev, and the University of Chile. The main objective of this initiative is to get to know this technology before it advanced massifications. We want to focus on working with the Ministry of Telecom and Transport in knowing what are going to be the challenges in updating all regulation related to transport. Also, we would like to have evidence while testing this new technology about user perceptions and user needs. The focus of any emerging technology is to really complement all policy actions that looks toward to serve citizens better. So we scoped the project with three main objectives. The first one, to test that technology and gather evidence and on a given context. Second, to promote sustainable and safe modes of transport. And third, to prepare and support the local innovation ecosystem. So the first part of the project consists on a 3-month operation period within a public park. Within those 3 months, we have the opportunity to first train the people in the ministry on how to set up the space and the roads in the park for this type of technology. Second, we have the opportunity to feel how users' experience was in using the service. Since it was a public park, it was very interesting, the diversity of ages that we have within the users, from kids to grandparents that use the autonomous vehicles to go to a pool. So we have in total more than 6,000 trips more than 2,000 unique users, and we have the opportunity to gather data on how they feel. Do they even realize that the vehicle didn't have people, driving it? Do we really serve, for example, people with disability by having this last mile transport from the entrance of the park to the pool? So it was a very interesting process for testing the technology, training the people in the ministry on how to leverage this technology and feel what changes should be made, for example, in insurance policy when dealing with this. The second part of the project is how do we create more awareness of the benefits and challenges of using this technology and incorporated it into the policy framework of transport. Also to encourage and to boost entrepreneurial platform, as you're going to see later in the session on the autonomous vehicle challenges. We have a technical table where experts from the Ministry of Transport, IDB, Transdev, and the University of Chile sit down and based on what we have the first 3 months, set up 8 challenges and a 9th one that is open. In order to have teams from any background proposing new ideas and new services in, for example, how to address better cybersecurity concerns that may raise from this type of technology, how to calibrate better the GPS system that is needed in order to set up the vehicle, what are new ways to identify, for example, passengers, since you don't have no one driving, and you need to leverage how to identify the characteristics of the passenger that are using the vehicle, how to react if there is a special need, what are the considerations in software and hardware. Is an amazing opportunity to get to know a new way to experience transportation. It's not only more sustainable, but it also has so much technology on it that the benefits effects in terms of creating an innovative ecosystem around this new technology is also a very important part of the project. I would like to close this message by encouraging all of you to get interested, to get involved, to learn what this technology can offer, what are the different use cases and contexts in which we can apply this technology. It's not only public transportation, but it's also a good way to, for example, start testing in ports, start testing in mining, start testing in many different areas where emerging technology can really leverage and complement other technologies that are putting in place in order to serve better the citizen needs. So thank you to all the stakeholders that have participated in the process. We're very happy to be part of this exercise. We're very happy to launch the hub within this important event, and we hope to have teams from all around the world participating in the challenge. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. It's always a pleasure to have you as part of these sessions. Now is the turn of Richard Mora, Innovation and Digital Transformation Project Manager at the Smart Cities Unit of the Ministry of Transportation and Telecommunications of Chile. Welcome to the session, Richard. You can start sharing your screen right now.
Thank you very much. Do you see my presentation?
Not
yet.
Dear public from the site event EcoMotion, thank you for being part of the 6th section of the seminar series.
Richard, can you please share your screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now we can see. Thank you. Please continue.
Yeah. Dear public from the site event EcoMotion, Thank you for being part of the sixth section of the seminar series, Autonomous Mobility and the Future of Transportation. This autonomous transportation is part of the EcoMotion. In this webinar, I'll present you the innovation opportunities in the mobility sector of Chile. For what are the trends and the current context in smart mobility? The greenhouse gas emission by the economic sector in Chile is increased than the media of the global emission. Our country commitment is to be a carbon neutral by 2050. But in that way, in transportation sector by 2022, at least 80% of the Santiago's bus fleet will comply with electric or Euro standard, and major expansion of the Santiago metro network. In this part is the around 90% it's for land transportation. For by the other side, in the last 9 years, vehicle fleet grew up every 76% up to 5.5 million for vehicles. And for example, between 2010 and 2015, the vehicle fleet grew 10 times faster than the road infrastructure. And the total trips in the city of Santiago grew by 30%. For that reason, the mobility model is necessary to enable by new technologies and focus it on the environment. In this part, the digital transportation generates effects on the transport network, such as new business models and more dynamic innovation ecosystem, such as in massive scale and the scale and speed application, mobility as a service, and new technology in digital connectivity, also the electric and share model, and micromobility creates challenge in the way of implementing public policies. Also, the artificial intelligence applied to public transport. For that reason, what are the innovation and current situation of smart mobility in Chile? The Ministry of Transportation create the coordination on intelligent transport system, has begun a renewal process aimed at incorporating new practices and technologies. It's based initially to taking advantage of the opportunities and enhancing the capability and its ecosystem. The more important tasks are the improvement to SCAC projects, the adoption of new work culture, the strengthen the territorial coordination, and the process of transportation at low cost, high impact. Also, it's an important task for us to encourage the advanced traffic control system. And this has different goals. They reduce the implementation, the deadlines and costs, looking for efficiency. They incorporate to traffic management for the mobility of the future, and the driving to a new development standard to address congestion. Then the picture is our urban traffic control center in Santiago. And another project is to creating a new standard for the country's public transportation system. In this new concept for the electric buses, including and several characteristics for public transportation with a high level of service. That's functionalities and accessible for people with disabilities, air conditioning, and Wi-Fi connectivity, USB charges, and low operational cost, and that is important. And for the challenge for autonomous vehicle, we signed in last year and cooperation with the Inter-American Development Bank and MTT and the Ministry of Transportation, and whose objective is to strengthen the institutional powers of the Ministry of Transportation to improve the instruments of regulation and management and planning of the system of transportation. Regarding for that cooperation, the Inter-American Development Bank and Ministry of Transportation and Transdev Group have joined forces to explore new technology through the first autonomous vehicle pilot in Latin America for passengers, which began its operation on December 10 for last year in Park of Higgins, and have the following results. Estimate 9% of the people transported with reduced mobility, more than 6,500 passengers transported, and 98% say that they felt safe and highly satisfied during the trip. Um, what are the lines of work and needs in the field of smart mobility in Chile? The opportunities for a future development that is our commitment is the territorial focus with greater importance in the regions. That is prioritizing the implementation of sustainable mobility projects in regions. Incorporate more technology by taking advantage of the new tenders for conservation projects that allow the continuity of the country's traffic control centers and system. And that beginning for the metropolitan region for in this year. Start that binding process. It is important. It's important to say for you. And promote the mass transportation and sustainable modes through a comprehensive mobility planning and management. And the last one is operational continuity and resilience to incidents, catastrophes, and emergencies. In this slide, show some lines of work in specific projects, like preparation of television camera tests for traffic monitoring based on 5G wireless communication. That project is trying to connect with 5G between the traffic control center and the traffic lights. And the market consultation for modernization of the CCTV and data collection of traffic monitoring. Regarding that point, that request for information will publish this in next years, that document, to collect a solution for the industry. A plan will be developed for the integration of traffic lights from peripheral areas using 4G wireless communication. Another opportunities for future development in detail has ITS technology introduced and traffic light prioritization for public transport and emergency services. It will evaluate the implementation of a cloud traffic control system that it's better for us to expand more traffic control centering in all the cities on Chile, and the technological framework for development and mobility as a service, and generation of technological modernization project for the origin destination survey. And in this slide, show you the special needs that the ministry require regarding the last specific line of work like the public private initiative is necessary, the investment in digital and energy networks, and also the pilot testing regarding the last opportunities, protocol development and promotion of innovation and development, and subscription of agreements and training, and the institutional technical update. For a challenge for future mobility regarding for the autonomous electric vehicle, in the future we will require changing infrastructure implementation and more high-speed telecommunication infrastructure like 5G or IoT network, timely to planning for maybe for fleet management, special fleet management for autonomous vehicle. And other challenge in autonomous vehicle could be translated in a long-term work schedule with pilot tests in Chile in work areas with high risk and precision in millimeters, such as airport and logistics sector, urban parks, among others. And continue a more intensive research process, trying to generate answers to some relevant questions, such as emissions, effect of congestions, regulation, strict urban development, safety, and accidents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's always a pleasure to be working hand to hand with the Ministry of Transportation on new solutions for a better mobility and improved transportation services. So thanks again. Now to continue with the program, I will present you Neil Himnover, Chief Innovation Officer of TransDev North America. So welcome to the session, Neil. Please share your screen with us and take the microphone.
Very good. Good morning. Buenos dias. Hola. Bonjour. For those around, good to see so many people on today. Can you see my screen okay?
We can see it.
Excellent. And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, good. Well, we'll start with a much younger picture of me. I've gotten a lot grayer, so it's always good to keep the younger picture up here. Going to go ahead and let's see. Advance. There we go. My topic for today is to discuss the current challenges in autonomous mobility services. I am the head of innovation for North America. My responsibilities are to manage our autonomous program within TransDev for North America. And I work very closely with our colleagues from all 18 countries that we operate out of, and to share and experience and build off of a common roadmap of deploying AVs, testing, learning, and being able to share those experiences and to share resources amongst this. So very excited to see the TransDev Easy Mile vehicle there in Chile kicking off. It's great teamwork there by the group put together to do that. And so very excited to see that in Chile and South America and being a good leader there. So very excited about that. So just a brief understanding of who TransDev is. We're one of the largest global leaders in public transportation in 5 continents, 18 countries, with 83,000 employees. Majority of those employees today are drivers and mechanics, etc. So in North America specifically, we have about 18,000 employees. We manage around 7,000 vehicles. We manage about 43 or 44,000 vehicles globally. We have 8 different AVs right now operating in North America. We deliver 14 modes of transportation. And within the US and Canada, we manage about 200 plus different cities and communities across both countries, with about 200 million annual passenger trips served each year. So our mission, as I mentioned, you know, when you listen to our mode of who our employees, a majority of our employees are, we talk about how autonomous vehicles can impact everyday lives. It also impacts our business. And so for us, it's very important for us to be able to understand and work through the technology of AVs, because it will have a very, very impactful message on our company and how we manage and how we operate in the future. So this is why we invest today to work through this. And it's to integrate this AV and learning through intermodal connectivities and operability, and then integrating that within the network. So if you've were part of Jose Triano's presentation, he did probably showed this slide as well, which talked about many different presentations of operations of AVs globally. So very exciting work that's being done globally in our AV program. These were kind of some of the key elements that even our group has been a part of, that I've been a part of in helping build some of these. So it's been exciting to be a part of these big projects as we go through. So 2 things I want to kind of just, you know, talk about, kind of a takeaways, so to speak, kind of a little red thread throughout the presentation. One one word is called challenge, right? And that's kind of the concept of this presentation. And that challenge is defined by a stimulating task or problem, or confront or defy boldly, right? So when we talk about challenges, you know, they're not easy. They come at you. In an innovation, it's a everyday occurrence, but it's the ability to take on those challenges and push through. So we'll talk a lot about challenges today. We'll talk about innovate and invest, right? Innovate in English, to introduce something new, make changes in anything established, or do something in a new way, right? So we're taking, you know, those challenges and innovating and creating something new, something different, and we continue to evolve that in every day that we come to work. Being in charge of innovation, that's our goal. So we're going to talk about the challenges in innovation and in AV deployment. One of those areas when we start talking about innovation and investment is talking about autonomous vehicles. And it's not, as you see here, here's kind of some pictures of the vehicles that we're using in TransDev for testing between the Easy Mile and Navia shuttles to get their vehicle, to the project of the iCrystal, which is a LORE TransDev partnership, as well as the Renault-Nissan relationship that we have as well. So there's a lot of ways and things to learn with the different types of vehicles, the different manufacturers that are there, and it's good to be able to build those different partnerships, because there is learning and growing and challenges with each one of those. And so we continue to invest and push forward in that sense. Electric vehicles, you guys talked a little bit about sustainability. Richard did in this previous discussion, and that's absolutely important globally. You know, I'd say North America is a bit behind some of the European countries and even some of the South America countries as far as moving that way. We have specific states that are really making it a priority, but for AVs, that's the only thing that we do look at, invest in, is that the AV must have a electric vehicle, either a roadmap or current delivery on that, because our future is to be sustainable and to deliver that. So again, more investment, more challenges, but again, with that comes challenges of how to manage a fleet that is electric. And then you start talking about different parts of the country, in the US, where we have really cold that impacts the battery, and also really hot that also impacts the battery by running air conditioning the entire time. So we have a lot of challenges that we meet there as well. Okay, So I'm going to talk about 8 specific challenges today. They're listed here as part of the private and public roads. Talk a little bit about that. Dedicated lanes and mixed traffic. The DSRC and V2X, Richard mentioned a little bit about that connectivity and 5G, so we'll get into a little bit of that. Data in general, there's a lot of data to manage, but we will work through some of the topics of that. Passenger delivery and goods delivery and how actually one and the other kind of actually help promote each other. Removing the safety operator, that's always a big topic. On-demand AV service platform, so moving it from a traditional fixed route type of service. And then I'll close with a bit of a COVID-19 and some things that we're seeing in the changes in transportation, some things that are obviously big challenges for us, but also some benefits that it also can generate. So those are the key challenges today. So the first one's kind of the private and public roads of mixed traffic. So one of the main things is when we start a project, it's really to move forward in understanding what the city wants, what the stakeholders want, and understanding the partnership. And a lot of that is doing the site assessment. And some of those, depending on in the US or Canada, depending on the province or the state, they have different regulations. And in the US, we start with the federal regulation and then we move to the state regulations. And the federal regulations have been very strict and continue to evolve almost monthly as we've seen. But what's key about the site assessment and the route design is to ensure the safety and the support of making the passengers feel safe and that you get the most out of the learning experience. And so what we have here is actually one of our future deployments in California, Northern California, that Dublin, California is actually it. And this is an area in which we're actually moving from a transit hub to a kind of a service area of shops and restaurants and homes and things like that. So this is actually a mixed traffic scenario. Part of it is a private road and part of it's public road. So we work through some of those elements that are important. But again, safety is always the key element in any of our deployments, and that the learning and the partnership belongs to the balance of the local authorities there and the group putting this on and investing in this is married together. Okay. Here's an example of a deployment we did in Montreal at the Olympic Park. We actually had 2 vehicles running. And one of the challenges we had here was not anything about the park. The park was actually perfectly fine. But the problem, we had actually 2 vehicles operating. So we had a vehicle-to-vehicle communication going, which was great. But we had a lot of people walking around the vehicles. We also had an area in which only one vehicle could pass. So we worked through some of the challenges of how to best orchestrate and manage the vehicles. And the vehicle-to-vehicle connectivity was the key, because in the single lane pass that we could make, we had pedestrians walking through there, but also the vehicles would have to communicate and say, okay, I'm at this stop, I'm going to allow this vehicle to go through and allow the other vehicle to come wait while the other vehicle cleared the space and then would continue on. So a lot of coordination, a lot of work to be done, a lot of signage to put up with the pedestrians there. But this was actually very, very good. We had a lot of good ridership. We had metros on both corners of the Olympic Park area. So it was very good, and it was a good benefit to the community there. And it was very intriguing. It actually drew even more people to the Olympic Park. And so that was a win-win. So when you start looking at private lands and private businesses and things like that are trying to deploy things, looking for good business cases that really make sense, that really is going to get the ridership, so you can survey that ridership, as Rhonda mentioned, and to go through that process. So very key. Another one, this is actually a private home development in Florida, and this is called Babcock Ranch. And so this is actually one that's actually in private land where we have, thousands of homes being built, but it's also considered mixed traffic. And so that actually provides a different challenge with regulations and approvals there. So we start to talk about how to best manage what's good for the city and the community here, but also how to, regulation-wise, how do we manage that with mixed traffic, because our federal government is very keen on making sure all public safety and all vehicles are safe no matter what, whether it's federal, whether it's on private land or in public streets. And in this case, it's kind of a mix of private and public. So we work through that. Gainesville, Florida, this is actually a very big deployment here. We have 3 vehicles, easy mile vehicles deployed here. And again, this one is actually around a University of Florida. And this is mixed traffic. This is on public streets. And this actually took almost a year for us to get approved through the federal government, through our National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, because of the complexities. We had mixed traffic, we had roundabouts, we had bicycle lanes, we had parked parallel cars, we had lots of pedestrians and students, a lot of motorcycles and scooters. There's really a busy, active session there, a lot of scooters as well. So for us, we had to prove and show the vehicle and how it would function in that manner. So they granted us short waivers and to collect video to show how the vehicle would interact in this session. So it took us about a year plus to actually get this approved in mixed traffic. What actually allowed us to get that approved was Montreal. Transport of Canada, which is the government agency around transportation in Canada, actually approved us to do this route outside of on public streets within the Olympic Park. Had much of the same characteristics of Gainesville. We actually shot video of this particular route. We also had integrated stoplights, et cetera. In this, we had some unprotected left turns, and the video that we created from this actually allowed us to get the approval from the U.S. To actually test, to do a 2-month pilot in Gainesville with no passengers, to also take video on those vehicles, and then be able to get them to do a longer term approval and to allow passengers. So what we built off of was learning from the Montreal Olympic Park public street scenario, and we were able to pass it on to the U.S. They were able to see how the vehicle acted in that scenario and granted us authority. So we're building upon things that we learn, the challenges we have in different countries, and to try to help take that information and pass it on to the next. So that was what I thought was a great experience there. Also in Denver, one of our tests and pilots that we did here was also important, related to cold weather, public streets, and how we to work with the local transit authority, which we also operate the bus services in Denver as our core fixed route business. And so there's a lot of being able to tie this into commuters because there was a nearby train station as well. And to build that, we were able to leverage a good business case. Again, I go back to the need for the business cases. So kind of the challenge drivers of this section was, watching for regulations, understanding the regulations, understanding the business case that you're looking for, looking for mixed traffic, easy approvals. A private land doesn't necessarily mean no mixed traffic. So it's important to be able to find those good business cases that allow you to still have the mixed traffic scenario, because I think you learn a lot from those. We've learned a ton about integrating into mixed traffic. Level of funding can differ between private land and public land development as well. We see that we have funding coming quicker for public land and public agencies, private agencies, to further the business along. So we see funding there going much faster, and deployments happening a bit faster on the private side. There's more integrated elements on the mixed traffic side. So you have to kind of build that in, and that takes a lot of public agency work and negotiations. So the timelines tend to be a bit longer. when you start dealing with the public side of the house. But a lot of the public land that we've done, airport services, military bases, shopping areas, things like that, things that actually drive passengers to take the ride. And in private land, a lot of university and college campuses, business campuses, hospital and senior centers. So those are kind of, it's like a continuous pattern business case of passengers. So that's kind of the balance of that private versus public land services and some mixed traffic. Move on to dedicated lanes. So I'm going to speak again to what I know, which is here in the U.S. You know, one of the adoption elements that you look for autonomous vehicles is to get vehicles on the road and get them into traffic and get them into scenarios. And what we have found is that what, you know, U.S. has been lacking, I know, significantly over the years, is that larger cities like New York has 82.8 miles in dedicated lanes for bus services. L.A. Next largest transport sector, 35.4 miles, right? And they have really bad congestion. I live in Chicago, 4.1 miles in Chicago. Traffic is terrible here, not as bad as LA, but pretty bad. And what we find is that reconfiguration of downtown cities and being able to dedicate it for the public transport sector is key. And then putting the AVs on there is actually even better. And if you have what we'll talk about a little bit later about the DSRC V2X scenario, you can start then getting, you know, fixed route bus to paratransit bus to AV connectivity in these dedicated lanes to move the vehicle. And you see adoption happen a bit faster when you have these dedicated lanes because the vehicles are able to move faster and they're able to move people quicker, you know, in that scenario. A lot of the speeds of these vehicles in the shuttles are still a bit lower than we'd like, or that passengers would like, let's say. But it's something that if you put them in a dedicated lane, that is something that I think is a challenge win if you can get them to that point. We're working with a lot of cities to work on dedicated lanes for them to understand the benefits. One, because you can start coordinating with the traffic lights. You can coordinate with the other vehicles that are probably in your fleet or that you're managing. You're able to communicate it with other pedestrian crosswalks and crossways as well. Maybe there's dedicated bike lanes next to the dedicated bus lanes. So again, lots of benefits of looking at dedicated lanes, and I would challenge everyone to kind of take a look at the benefits and working with the cities and their planning to do that. We do see a quicker adoption and interaction with those. The speeds have been improved. The efficiency, reduced emergency stops, right? Because you're in a bit more of a controlled environment. Improved flow of traffic, you know, which is key. And then public feels a bit more comfortable because everybody's in their lane, right? So everybody knows where they're supposed to be and where the vehicles are going to be. And so they see a vehicle come in, it's in this lane. There's no question about it. So it becomes an earlier comfortable adoption rate as well. So, so creating those new lanes, we've actually done that in some of our pilots. We've been able to be successful in trying to create specific lanes for the AVs and a few of them. And that's where we learned that some of the adoption and quicker speeds are achieved that way. And we've also seen where that V2X integration continues to move forward. So what happens then is, and this is one of the areas in which we look at, this is the red vehicle here is the iCrystal that TransDev's working on with partnerships with LORE and AV providers, is then the connectivity of being able to do shuttle platooning, right? And so in the case of Jacksonville, Florida, they have a people mover that's on a rail system today. It was built in the 70s. And they're looking to replace it, and they are testing AVs. And TransDev one of the companies working with them to test AVs to replace a people mover system. This is where an AV shuttle platooning scenario works pretty good, as long as you can have some kind of dedicated lane. And then when it reaches the city, it can definitely split off into different sectors if need be. But again, another challenge, another thing to think about when you start talking about dedicated lanes, platooning vehicles, and things like that within even an urban environment. So we look at getting cities to understand the value of dedicated lanes for public transport, working through the city planners, monitoring traffic flow to understand how it works today and how could you change it or improve it with AVs, collecting that improved headways, and then showing some of the safety benefits by being able to connect it in with the transport network. So, okay, on to the DSRC. I know Richard mentioned a bit of this today. Just for those who are still feeling their way through the technology elements, the DSRC side of the house is a short-range communication between vehicles typically. And so these are these elements that are, you may have an onboard unit of these vehicles that connect and communicate each other. So that's important to be able to understand that. And on the V2X side, which is kind of the vehicle to everything, where you're trying to manage the connectivity amongst many other things, not just vehicle to vehicle, but to other elements of the community. And some people call it CV to X, right? So that's also cellular cloud. One of the projects that we have going on right in Northern California actually deals with a concern and a challenge, which is 5G. 5G operates at a certain frequency band, which actually overwrites some of the other communication within this particular neighborhood that we're operating in. And so instead of using the traditional DSRC method to communicate to the traffic signal with the onboard unit and the roadside unit and communicating with them, we're actually having to now take a cellular approach where we're actually taking the signal from the traffic signal, not communicating it directly to the vehicle who's right there, but actually taking it, sending it to the cellular system, into the cloud, into the city's network, through the firewall, et cetera, and then to validate the pieces, and then sending a cellular signal to the actual onboard unit in the vehicle. And we're actually trying to test that because there's a lag time when you're going through all those different networks. So there's definitely a concern as far as how you work through that piece of it. And we're seeing that challenge right now in California, and we're trying to figure out how to make it work. We've asked for federal approval to work in this certain band that used to use this DSRC. They've been denied, so our only option is to figure out how to improve the speed of communication on the V2X through the cellular cloud and through the network. So we continue to look at that, investing in communication technology, because that's how you can start to improve the efficiency not only of your core transit business that you have today in your cities, but also to add AVs into that mix. And so this is where you start to talk to other elements within the network and to start pushing that. So it's collecting and sharing that data with the operating environment. That is the key. That is the investment we're looking at. And we continue to have multiple tests throughout US and Canada and in many of our other countries of Transdev as well to be able to work through this. Today, this is a diagram that our colleagues in France have put together. They're actually, I don't know if I have a slide here. Yes, actually I have a slide. This is our colleagues in France are actually been testing in Rouen, where they have in a roundabout, they have 4 LiDARs that are in a roundabout scenario. And so now when a vehicle enters a roundabout, it communicates with and sees a future vision of that roundabout and can then navigate through that roundabout much quicker. We have roundabouts in Gainesville in Florida. We do not have LiDARs, and right now the vehicle has to pause and allow the operator to validate that the vehicle can continue to move through the vehicle or through the roundabout, which is not quite as smooth and defeats a bit of the purpose of the roundabout, which is to keep traffic moving. So in this case, our colleagues in France have actually succeeded in actually working through the roundabout with these LiDARs and this infrastructure in the environment to be able to have that future vision of what the vehicle will be coming into, see that it's clear, and just continue through its process through the roundabout, which is fantastic. So it's having that communication and sometimes an advancement in infrastructure that does help with processing. Some of the DSRC benefits, while V2X is still being kind of worked through in certain cases on communication, this was a study by the University of Michigan Research Institute, where just by adopting the DSRC here in these early years can reduce the number of incidents and accidents and things like that. So it's very it's very impressive just on building that relationship between say a vehicle-to-vehicle type communication or vehicle-to-signal type communication, even in the short range, because and this was there based off of research data trying to tell us what is the benefit of having this type of technology, and the V2X definitely improve that as the technology continues to improve. And those benefits within the V2X, I kind of talked about this already, which is trying to improve and talk to more things on a broader scale and a farther scale within the environment. So it can make better and quicker decisions and allow you to maybe reroute vehicles to avoid specific areas and things like that. So it is part of our TransDev, and what we do is part of our ATS team in France and globally. Lewis and team there in Chile is building this this connected infrastructure where you can see all of this. The vehicles are connected to our centralized hub, our control center, and then we're able to see any of the communication between the DSRC and things here as well. So challenge drivers, good understanding, investment decisions for the city, understanding the technology providers in your country, and finding good partnerships with OEMs. Those are key drivers and the challenges. On the data side, we see disconnected data. We see disconnected passengers. And so our investment is continuing to build on improving that design and communication amongst the passengers. And so collecting data integration, data-driven service design, working with those to derive that. So we look at smart city integration, right? Again, going back to the V2X piece of it, it's understanding and understanding how freight can be delivered, how other delivery systems, other vehicles in the network are moving, and working with them, working through other smart city components. We've looked at in the AV demonstration projects, fixed route, AV shuttle, AV demonstration zones, shared rides, predictive trips, dynamic parking management, on-demand transit. So there's a lot of different elements here to really kind of tie in that smart transportation. And AVs are a key element into tying that in. So when we look at data, we start talking about the collection and the KPI focus on each project, learning from each deployment, creating that kind of diverse AV deployments that pulls the data in. I think you have to find good partners that are willing to have the hard conversation about sharing data. I know there's a lot of proprietary work being done out there, but it's important to have the data that you can share amongst the group and find those partners that are willing to help share that data, because there's a lot of growth. Universities are key to get them involved in the mix as well, because they can help at either a reduced rate or free be able to take the data that you have and be able to study it and be able to do some presentation elements on it, which we've leveraged in the US as well. So, and look for those good customer experience goals and projects, understanding what the passenger needs are, because that drives a lot of the data pieces. Passengers, delivery and goods. So our focus is on improving the passenger experience, right? Not only just in AVs, but in our fixed route, paratransit business, rail business, whatever it is we do, we're trying to build that passenger focus. So we take that mindset and say, okay, how do we apply that to AVs? And we say, okay, well, if we're looking at passengers, we're also being asked to move goods and freight, right? And so I just put a list together here of the similarities, right, of passenger and freight. We still have a safety operator right now, one that's managed by operator, one that has for passengers, one for packages. You're looking at operations deployment for both. You have service optimization. You have to optimize both. You have ops, AVL, ops and passengers, so you understand where the vehicle and the packages are. Customer locator and package tracking, very similar, right? You want to know both of those. You have ADA requirements. In the US, that's American with Disabilities Act, which for passengers with disabilities is key. There's no customer experience there necessarily from a real live person there, but still, again, people want to know where the packages, things are. There's passenger experience, which is people want to know where the vehicle is and when to arrive. We have other notifications. And then on-time performance, right? Doesn't matter. They want their goods delivered on time. We want to be delivered on time. So a lot of similarities between the two, and both actually work in the same manner. So we look at some of the people deliveries we see today. I was in Las Vegas for their conference. They had some interesting people delivery from the air scenarios. You have a lot more scooters taking over the world these days. And on the freight side, you have goals to invest in freight and how to move people, flexible abilities. And so you start to see Neuro, who's delivering packages. You see air deliveries. You see bicycle, Uber Eats and app experiences, and Amazon Prime that's delivering via drones and things like that. So, and then the Easy Mile, they've actually been, they're a partner with Continental. Continental's actually an investor of theirs, and they're actually working through robotic dogs. And so this is actually an Easy Mile Gen 2 vehicle here with delivery dogs coming in there. So when you look at challenges driving passengers and freight, there's a lot of similarities, and both can be looked at the same time. And so when the vehicle may not be operating for passengers, it could be running for packages or freight. So you want to look at the benefits of both of those. It creates new ideas on how to deliver that. So, okay, kind of getting into the last few here. Passengers, so when you start saying removing the safety operator, we have still working through, and we don't have a solution on this, is you have passengers with disabilities. Here you see a paratransit van that you see commonly in the US. On the right of that, you see a picture here of someone helping that person off using the back lift. That's still a service that some people still need assistance with. And so removing that safety operator is a challenge in these scenarios. You see in the lower left-hand corner another scenario where it's off a commuter bus, delivering a passenger through the back part of the bus. And on the right side, you see kind of a next step or next generation of the ability for wheelchairs for you to be able to secure your wheelchair with these little bars here on the side, here on both sides that actually clamp in against the wheel. So you start to look and work at partnerships to understand how you can leverage technology to work through the constraints. Passengers with disabilities here, this is actually an Easy Mile Gen 2 vehicle. We actually have put in these securement elements that are same as what we use in the paratransit vehicles. So that's kind of an early phase one. We'll look at doing a bit more of a hand-free securement as well. So we continue to work through that. So that's difficulty when you start talking about avenues for removing the safety operator. What is key though is that you have a AV fleet supervision. Well, this is an example of what Transdev has here, which you're able to operate all the cameras, the microphones, the things of the vehicle, being able to understand the vehicle communication, what's going on with that. And then the fleet control software managed around that as well. We continue to look at how to look at using those safety operators when we do remove them out, and how we are able to work through the process of the safety ambassadors and retooling process, their skills. So when we look at challenges there, it's regulations, changes, data gathering, policy writing, package delivery. How do you manage that? Conflict management with passengers, emergency management. AV bullying, which is another one. So how people jumping in front of the vehicle to make it stop and navigate around obstacles. These are still areas in which are still challenges that we're still working through. So two more here, on-demand AV services. So in the US, there was a study done, 1.5% to 13.5% of each city's population had unmet transit needs. So we start to look at how do you service those, and can you put in a microtransit or an on-demand service? And so we look at investment in customer acquisition. We look at investment in customer experience, which is providing an app and being able to work through deployment of the vehicle. And so with that, we're building towards the mobility as a service. We have a product within Cityway that allows us to use this. And it takes people from what could be maybe a fixed route or a fixed route on-demand service and turn it onto a fixed route service, turning it onto a fixed route on-demand service, where you can put in different elements. And so we're now integrating that in our AVs into that microtransit platform of Cityway. And so that allows us to help us navigate and allow us to put AVs into service for microtransit. And that allows us to connect the passengers with other elements, trip planning service, things like that, all built into the Cityway platform. So we continue to look at what the passenger wants, their flexibility, key data that they're looking at, data-driven tools, and that kind of stuff. So that's pretty key. I'm on to my last element here because I think I'm almost out of time. And that is kind of the COVID-19 changes in transportation. So you'll see probably a lot of information around the AV use in COVID scenarios. And so, you know, a lot of AVs have been put on the shelf, right? Unless you're a frontline service agent, you're no longer able to go to work, and most of these AVs still have safety operators in them. So most of those vehicles have kind of gone to kind of sitting in over the last few months. At least they have in the U.S. However, there's a lot of different cases. I'm only highlighting a few. In China, it was interesting. I follow Baidu a lot on the work that they do. Very interesting work, very interesting company. But they're providing their Apollo technology with the Neolix platform, being able to service frontline staff. They're actually disinfecting roads. In one island, they're doing it 3 times a day. They're actually then using the cameras on board to alert officials of large crowds gathering and not wearing masks. So that's actually extremely interesting as well, using the vehicle's camera system for driving around and checking things out. So that's interesting. And again, a different type of setup, but again, a lot more spraying and disinfecting around hospitals and around areas that are of risk. In the U.S., General Motors, the Cruise, they sat still for about a month, and then they brought the vehicles and some people out to actually start delivering food with these AVs, which was what people were actually looking for, was more fleet and different ways of delivering service. Pony.ai, which is a Toyota backed AV. They were also doing locally. They were doing some deliveries of groceries and meals in Southern California. Neuro, which is a startup from a couple of Google employees, or Waymo employees, old Waymo employees, I believe, were servicing delivery food, PPEs, and clean linens and other supplies to workers there. Beep, which is a Navia vehicle, is in Jacksonville, was servicing medical supplies and COVID-19 tests, where they would load them up and send them off to another building, and then they would move those so they would have less interaction with the COVID tests, and also the different vehicles delivering food and other linens and things like that. So when we look at our return to pilot, you know, we're limiting passengers right now in these shuttles to 4. So one there's about 6 seated, so 1 in each corner. We're wiping down the vehicles every run. We're doing a deep clean each night. Hand sanitizers on board. Masks are required for everyone getting on, our safety operators included. Communications to passengers on cleaning process. They feel confident they can get on the vehicle properly. And then all alerts and safety measures there around that. We've also started to include, as I mentioned earlier, on the microtransit, of actually now interestingly using the microtransit application, because it allows you to understand how many passengers can actually be in the vehicle. So deploying out the application, the microtransit software so that people can reserve their seats. So now we have limited number of seats. Now we're doing that. So we're actually not only doing that for AVs, but also doing that for fixed route bus services as well, and turning those fixed route bus services into an element where you can understand how many seats you have available on the bus. And in other cases, we're actually deploying AVs in a microtransit environment and moving those bigger buses to the busier sections, because now we're only running 15 to 20 passengers per bus. And so you can move your assets around. So we focus on that element as well. So again, reduced vehicle capacity is huge. Social distancing is big. We're trying to find ways that we can use our technology, still use AVs to promote those elements. Cleaning is key, and keeping our safety operators and those passengers safe is absolutely key to that. So those are some of the elements and challenges there. So I'm sure you guys have a bunch of ideas and challenges that you're seeing and having already. So always interested to share ideas, and you can contact me anytime. And as my two key words here, so innovate and accept the challenge or get left behind. And that's what we're trying to do is continue to innovate, invest, and challenge ourselves and address those challenges head on so we can continue to grow. So I think about 3 or 4 minutes off my mark. So sorry about that, Richard, but I think that's it.
That's fine, Neil. Thank you very much for your presentation. Great to know about such different projects that you have been developing at Transdev, and the new technological solutions that you're taking a look at in your way of building novel autonomous mobility services for public transportation and for some of the difficult urban challenges that we currently have. Well, let's continue with our next panelist. He's Luis Vidal, Head of Strategy at Transdev Chile. So welcome to the session, Luis. You can share your screen with us. Luis, I think your microphone is muted.
Okay, right now, do you hear me right now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome.
Continue.
So, well, I want to be as brief as possible, because it seems like there are a lot of questions for Neil, so let's go. I will introduce briefly our project. It's the second phase of our project here in Chile. It's based on this AV pilot that we had for 3 months in Santiago, Chile, and this open challenge and series of webinars. Okay, that is called it's called Autonomous Mobility Challenge. Okay, so autonomous is autonomous in Spanish, as you can imagine. I will go through the part of Transdev that Neil has already shared with the audience, and I will go directly to the point. First of all, I would like just to highlight the elements that the EADB, the Inter-American Development Bank, Transdev, and the Ministry of Transportation and Communications of Chile has created to push forward the autonomous mobility in Latin America. So this is the first of its kind in the region, and it was a very risky challenge that we want just to address all together. And it is just to create a long-term project where the EADB from the multilateral side and Transdev from the private side can be the strategic partner for national governments in order to boost the autonomous mobility with a sense of a shared, sustainable, on social inclusion vision. That's very, very important, because basically today we have to very directly and totally separate the ways of thinking about the autonomous driving. That is basically one of the it's the extension of the living room or the extension of the office. So you can keep working on during your leisure time on the vehicle while you are in a gridlock, or it's the other one. It's more the one that we are sharing with the ministry and the EADB, that is this shared and sustainable and social inclusive with a public transport mass transit orientation, with especially, well, you can see it with the shuttles that we use. No, it's between 12 and 16 users. So this point, I just want to just clear it out. The main goal is to establish this AV hub in Chile as the AV hub for Latin America. And in order to achieve this goal, we started with this trigger project that is based in 3 phases. The first one that we have already finished, that is this pilot in Santiago, that it's, well, we made our little piece of history, you know, bringing the first AV in Latin America. That's something that we should be proud of. And then there is the AV Tech Hub, okay, that it starts with the project that I'm going to explain, and then expand the operations and the knowledge through the continent. So I will try just to share some the experience through video. Hopefully you can enjoy it as I do. That depends on the internet, but let's see. This is experience that we had here from the beginning. Okay, so that's all. Hopefully you could watch it as I did. Okay, so basically this is the main figures. Okay, it's a 3-month operation. We work every day for the working in the working day, 6 hours per day, and the uptime was between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. The length was about 1 kilometer, and the length consisted in 3 stops. But basically, we used only 2 because we saw that 95% of the users they go from the point A to the point B. That connects one of the main metro stations of the metro system in Santiago de Chile. That's called Parque O'Higgins. It's the name of the public park that we operated in. And connects with the Olympic swimming pool of Santiago. Okay, this Olympic swimming pool has around a population, user populations of 2,000, 3,000. So basically, what we got is not only testing net energy, but also a last mile solution, you know, in which we could have this operational impact. That is basically we got over 6,500 passengers for the 3 months. Where the 9% of the passengers were seniors, the 30% are children that they were with their parents, of course. And for me, the most important figure is the next. It's over the 70% of the users they're utility users, so utility trips. So that means that they were commonly, common users of the park, and they used the vehicle as a new mode of transportation. So basically, we reduced a trip of 50 minutes on foot to only 2 minutes, and that was a great improvement. So, okay, so just finishing that and getting to the point that is basically the Autonomous Mobility Challenge. Okay, when we finished that pilot, okay, the Autonomous Mobility Challenge came. Okay, and Autonomous Mobility Challenge is the name of the open of two lines of work that they go both together. So from one side, it's the open challenge that we have just launched. That it's a continental open challenge for established entrepreneurs to develop specific solutions and tools for specific problems that we faced here in Santiago, and that our group at Transdev realized that are the next steps for these kind of services. But also, let's try just to go through the video. So yeah, so the other side of the project is it's a series of webinars with international experts. We have just had the pleasure of watching the Neil Evanover presentation, but we also had we're going to have and had others such as Tim Dawkins from the World Economic Forum, or Lida Han, that well, she's the executive director of EcoMotion, that is the entity that gave us this space as a site event for the Innovation Week 2020. Yolanda Martinez, that she's from the ADB, Trachini from the Universidad de Chile. Then we had our global director, our global director in our AV global operation director. That it's Jose Triano, so and others. So it's a very interesting series of webinars. So you can check them. You can check those that we have already launched. So there is a Vimeo. There's a Vimeo folder, so you can check all of them, and then you can attend for free for the next webinars. And well. The idea is that they joined us. They are global brands, very well known global brands like MIT, Global Forum, TU, Delft, and etc. Well, and then on the other side, as I said, okay, there is the challenges. There's an open challenge that we want to solve. 8 specific AV challenges. Okay, so it's basically we're seeking fresh solutions for them, and these are the challenges. So the first one is an area on-demand simulator for AV splits. This one I will explain each of them. Okay, afterwards. The second one is an autonomous dispatching system for AVs, and we have another kind of solutions that we are seeking is identifying passengers for on-demand AV services, and the behavioral recognition on AVs and protocols. No? So one thing that Neil said is basically how we can live without the safety operator. No? And this is one of the topics. The driver today, see the bus driver, he's not only serving as a driver, but also serving with other things that just assisting the passengers in case that something happens. And when we face this situation where there is no person or employee on the bus, we need to understand how this vehicle could interact with the passengers, and then the protocols in order to activate the emergency agencies. No? Then there is supported solutions for reliable AV navigation. This is something that we faced here in Chile, something that we never experienced in the other continents. Is basically seems like the telecommunication system in Latin America is not as consistent as in other regions of the world. So we got some problem with the telecom communication, with the telecom communications. As you know, that is very important for the geolocalization of the vehicle and other systems of the bike. So basically, we need to find solutions, software or hardware solutions that they can support us and assist us in order to have a 99.99% of chances, you know, to have the connectivity that is required. Then the digital onboard services on AVs is something that that is coming as the passengers, they will be more relaxed in the AV's future. There is a gap. There is a gap in their time while they are traveling, commuting, that they can enjoy different experiences from platforms, let's say from platform or advertising or working, etc. So this is an opportunity, it's a business opportunity that we can explore. Then realize that the deployment, it might be improved in terms of time. So it could be interesting just to reduce the time of implementation. So these services can be of interest in business cases where the time constraint it's a key factor. Okay, this is the challenge. Let's see how we can implement these kind of services faster. And the last is the cybersecurity, something that will be of more relevance as we approach to this B2X future. So today, for the vehicle, seems like it's not as important as in the future, but we must prepare ourselves for that future. So why we chose these challenges? Basically, because as I said, this alliance is focused on shared autonomous mobility. Then we have an eye on the AV operations presence. So it's like, okay, what we need today, you know, to be more operative and provide a better service, and then solving AV local problems. So this is why we have these eight challenges. This is the explanation of all of them. And yeah, and then it's okay. What's for those that they submit their proposals, no, and go through the process. So, you know, to be one of the chosen ones. So basically, it's there will be a technical committee that will choose up to 3 winners after the e-boot camp. Okay, so we will choose, if I'm not wrong, it's around 10, 12 startups that they will pass the first round. Then they will go through a 4-week e-boot camp. And then we will choose up to 3 startups that they will have up to 24 USDs for the development of the MVP. And an extra value is the incubation will be for free. It's a 5-month incubation, and TrustDev will guarantee piloting the MVP in the next AV operations that we have here in Chile. So this is all, I guess. Yeah, something that is yeah, and it's a topic. It's some ask me why we are launching this open challenge. Is basically because we want to be present on these slides. Here, we believe that Latin America is full of knowledge and full of human capabilities in order to boost solutions for the AV market. We've proven for other technologies in transportation and in city development, so I'm sure that we can do the same for the AV market also. You see that there are tons of startups that they are developing solutions, AVs themselves, solutions and tools for this market, or that the value market is it's impressive, such as Argo or Sux or Neuro or Lucid, etc. And because there is something that is really we need to keep in mind that it's basically okay. So it's a 60 billion market. Okay, this is the potential of the market today, and we need to keep an eye on it because there are today solutions that they can pivot and be part of this ecosystem, and there is a big budget, okay, that it's available for the next years. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis, very much for your presentation. It's really very interesting to be sharing the organization of this Autonomous Mobility Challenge project together with Transdev, the Ministry of Transportation and Communications of Chile, and the Inter-American Development Bank in support with the Universidad de Chile. So thanks again, and let's continue with the last part of our session. This time, we'll hear the questions from the public, and yes, I will tell the questions to the speakers, and the idea is that you can elaborate on the questions in English, and you can also say some things in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking audience. In any way, we will have this video recorded and uploaded in our webpage, and we will add the Spanish subtitles for our public, which is mainly Chilean citizens. So let's start with the first question. This is a question from Luis Uechi, and it's for Richard Mora. So Richard, could you please elaborate a bit more about the strategy of the Chilean government in relation with smart mobility and smart cities? Which projects are you working on, and what's your vision about this subject? Please, Richard.
Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Regarding the how our management for a smart city concept in Chile transportation system, our approach of a smart city for the Minister of Transportation as an articulator and innovating. It's include an state and academy and industry and citizens, working collectively with all the actors of society in the adoption of technologies and new ways of working to improve citizen services. For example, we have 10 urban traffic control centers in the country, and we understand that the mobility of the future will be hyper-connected. And we are in the process of introducing new process automation technologies, and we're looking to the integrate platforms and with different sources of information and big data, to improve and to doing more efficiency our traffic control center and all the ITS devices, ITS centers in the country.
Thank you, Richard. Another question for you is the focus of the Ministry of Transportation in Chile just around public transportation, or do you also have projects on private transportation modes regarding these new technologies and smart cities?
Yeah, we have not only a focus for public transportation services. In the last year, the last 2 years, we have contributed with a consortium. That group and consortium has a strategy for electromobility and for include the electromobility in all the private and the public sector. That group or strategy have performed for the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Transportation and the in different public and private sector, like and different institutions and the municipalities. What we aim is to connect it and to include the electromobility in all the transportation services and the taxis. We have with the in the regions programs and plans to include and transfer the different transportation services like taxis and colectivos. It's an integrating solution, and it's not only the public transportation service.
Thank you, Richard. Actually, the third question that I was going to ask you was about these projects in other regions of Chile, and you just mentioned that in your last answer. So thanks for that. I will now continue with a question for Neil. So Neil, we understand that the development of batteries in the last couple of years have been huge. So we have batteries that are getting less expensive and with higher density of charging. And so the question here is, sorry, what will be more important for autonomous vehicles? Having larger capacity batteries for the vehicles, or having a denser area of points of charging for the vehicles, like, for example, points where the vehicles can charge in the route along their path? Or is it more important to get like batteries with higher density of energy capacity?
So I think what's been interesting since I've gotten into this in 2016 and looking at some of the first generation shuttles and where battery life was like 8 hours. But if you ran the air conditioner, it was more like, 5 or 6 hours. And then you saw a jump in 2018 into 19 where you went from an 8 to an 18-hour battery life. And even with heavy usage on those vehicles, you were somewhere around 12 to 16 hours of service, even with heavy use on batteries and things like that. So I think the idea right now, a lot of people are using these AVs on a fixed route service. And so, yes, you could put up maybe specific spots on the route that allow you to maybe, make a stop, do some conductive charging for a moment, and then continue on your route. But I think the broader scope of this is for these vehicles to be a bit, shall I say, autonomous, where they can be a bit more free to roam and to operate, say in a microtransit type environment where maybe you have a geo-fenced in area and you're maybe picking people up at virtual stops, and so they don't maybe necessarily follow a normal route. So I think the ideal scenario longer term is that you have the larger capacity batteries, or you have an avenue in which you're able to easily swap out batteries when you're starting to see larger city fleet buses now that have electric buses, BYD, et cetera, that have these, and some of them have come in with alternatives to swap out batteries, so be able to pull out batteries, put a new bank in, and continue on the route. That's an option. But I think the ability for at least the smaller type shuttles is going to be a benefit of having a larger capacity vehicle, so they could be a bit more free to roam and around a geofenced area in a broader deployment arena. The larger buses, I think, could be an argument to have some conductive charging, because most of those will be used for fixed route type services. So I think it depends on maybe the asset that you're looking at for deploying. But right now, I would say that the larger capacity battery allows you to have a bit more flexibility, and is where most people are kind of leaning towards right now, at least what I've seen in the industry.
Great to know that. Thank you, Neil. Another question for you is the following. Could you kindly elaborate a little bit more on what are the pros and cons about pure AV technology like Waymos versus connected AV technology? For example, is connected AV technology going to be more vulnerable to cyber attacks? In your opinion, which one is going to prevail?
That's a very good question. So what I do know about Waymo and their technology is that, you know, they've built it to be adaptive and to be very forward thinking in its vision, right? So it's able to operate on its own, to be able to operate independently of other things, and that's been kind of the goal. And I'd say that a lot of autonomous technology providers are very similar in that case. There is an argument though. I had a conversation with a professor from California, Berkeley, who actually helped create one of the first autonomous vehicles, which was one of the original to get their deployments in Amsterdam, which is one that Transdev has operated since 2005. And that's built, the original version of that was built off of magnets, right? Magnets in the ground. And so that was basically infrastructure built in to run that vehicle. Now to get there is, you know, expand well beyond that. It has sensors on their vehicles and has a lot of different elements. But this particular professor really believed that infrastructure still has a element of redundancy and assistance with those types of services in case of a failure. So I think that me personally, a lot of the technology is being built around the AV on the vehicle being the standalone element of operating, and obviously there's connectivity back to a command center, but the decision making and a lot of that process is done at the vehicle level, where the infrastructure element, I understand the question is very concerning about whether there's cyber attacks, cyber incidents, can they mess with the infrastructure, can they do those things? I still think that there's an element where the vehicle and the decision making and the complexities that are there at the vehicle level to handle those scenarios, but there is a redundancy and there is a value of having some infrastructure connectivity there to allow you to either improve the efficiency of your route, or to ensure that if for some reason there was a failure of sensors on board, that there's also some level of connectivity to that infrastructure that could also help with the decision-making process too. I think that just helps with the overall redundancy. I still think that Waymo has a great set of technology, good vision. I think that a lot of other manufacturers have the same mindset, and I think that's still the right one. But I still believe personally that infrastructure, there is infrastructure that helps with the process of transport and can be either a redundancy or an assistance to the overall process.
Thank you, Neil.
Yep.
Well, in relation to the development of infrastructure for the autonomous vehicles, what can you tell us about the international standards on this technology? And also, have you been working with the authorities on developing these standards and developing standards also for the data policies for the AVs? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it's a continuing evolving process. I'll start first with the regulators. So our federal government and state governments are very interested in the data. You know, as part of the approval to grant us to do these pilots and these tests, you know, they're wanting data and to learn from this information, and we're gladly to oblige to provide that, because the more information our government has and the regulators have allows them to generate their policies and allows them to evolve their restrictions that they have, and maybe loosen those restrictions after they have a subset of data to provide them with, you know, real live data and scenarios that have been tested. So it's absolutely key, and we're working very closely with the government agencies that request it to understand what that is. The balance there is the AV manufacturers, the providers, and so there's a proprietary information behind the scenes. So you have to really work with them to say, okay, we're looking for this kind of information. Are you willing to share? How much data are you willing to share? And you have to really build that relationship up front and understand what is it that the AV manufacturers are willing to share as well, so that you can get the most out of your pilots and out of your test programs and things. What we do, I'll use an example of our Dublin deployment in California, is that we have a mix of relationships there. They have a regional transit authority called the MTC. They have the local transit authority, which is Livermore Transit Authority. And together they've pulled together funds along with federal funding to be able to fund this project. And we've actually sat down with them and created a list of KPIs that they want to collect. Some of them are manual from an operations perspective, collecting how maintenance is done, you know, when are there's failures, at what mileage or kilometers did it occur, the stuff like that. But then there's other data that we can actually pull from the vehicle itself. And that's where we start to work with internally our own data, work with what the stakeholders are wanting, and to try to align the KPIs to make sure we can meet those. In some cases, there's just in some cases the request for data is very detailed and is great, but sometimes the vehicle, there's so much data going on within these AVs that not all of the data is handled and collected and stored. Some of it's just real-time decision-making data that's taken and dispersed. So you have to kind of balance that out. But I think for each project that you do, there's a set of KPIs that you should, as a stakeholder, agree upon, understand what those are, decide what can be delivered and what cannot be delivered, and then work together to show that information and be able to share it amongst the groups, because that's where the learning goes, and that's where the evolution of taking easy pilots and tests and moving it to a medium, you know, complexity to a very hard complexity, and having that data along the way and those KPIs helps show, you know, even the regulators, like we did for Montreal and Gainesville, like, hey, we're doing this already. See this? They take the data and they say, yep, you know, you are, and it's actually more complicated than what we were originally agreed, so let's approve it and move forward. So all key stuff there. I hope that answered your question, but.
Yeah, thank you very much, Neil. And just one quick last question for this part. Which scope is taking, who in the US is leading the legislation projects on AV? Is it at a local, state, or federal level? Is there a particular state that is taking the lead on AV regulation?
I would say there's definitely some progressive states in the US that have pushed the limit. And so what we see is that a lot of our business cases are generated at a local level, at a business case need, whether it's at a city or a county or whatever level or province level. And then we'll usually, you know, once we've built that case, then we submit that to the federal government. We have, I would say it's more from the local state up to the federal level. So then we go to the federal level for approvals. You know, they're focused on safety and passenger safety 100%, which we 100% support that. So it's our case to bring them business cases that make sense. But most of that is, I would say, more at the state and local level. There's been a few initiatives recently on the COVID-19 scenario where the federal government actually came back to the public or the private industry and said, hey, if you are working on areas where you can help frontline workers and work through delivering of products and things like that, they were active in helping push that and reviewing those applications and moving those things forward if they made sense and were safe. So that was, I'd say, was a very proactive element from the federal government, where it was coming from the federal government down. But I'd say most of it's coming from kind of the private or public sector at the state, local levels, and in moving it up to the federal level for approval and direction and data sharing.
Well, thank you. I think that is a good answer for our question. So now I will continue with one question for Luis Vidal. So Luis, what can you tell us about the data management of the project of the AV in Chile? So did you have access to federal data or only private sources? Maybe you can elaborate on the data that will be available for the Autonomous Mobility Challenge. Oh, I think, Luis, are you there?
Hello, hello, hello. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Okay, I was talking to anybody. Okay, regarding, yes, so from the experience that we got here with a 3-month pilot, we have several data sets. First of all, we conducted a survey for the 3 months, so all the raw data and all the results will be available for those that will be in the e-bootcamp, okay, so for the chosen projects. Then there is the GPS data of the vehicle that will be available as well. And then for the first time in our operations with AVs in Transdev, we implemented cameras with artificial intelligence at the bus stops and the vehicle, so inside the vehicle, so we could record the passengers' behavior, as well as count the number of passengers that they were waiting for the vehicle, or they were traveling on the vehicle. So that's very useful data for 3 of the 8 challenges. Then what else? Then we have all the data regarding the pickups and the drop-offs per station, per day, for all the operational days. And then possibly I'm missing something, but I would say that these are our own data sets. For sure, we can open data sets and more documentation for the different status that they will be in the e-bootcamp, but we can discuss that each case.
Thank you, Luis. Now we just have a couple of minutes left, so I kept 2 final questions for Neil. So the first one is, how do you imagine the street design when you consider dedicated space for AVs and mass transit? Could they share the lane in the near future?
Yes, absolutely. I think when the biggest element, or I'd say the biggest challenge, right, as we're using that word in this throughout this presentation, is the speed of the vehicles, for the autonomous vehicles. So you have to make sure the vehicles can keep up with the rest of the fixed route fleet, etc. But absolutely. There's certain cases where we have in urban environments where um, we have vehicles today that are operating in a dedicated lane. They're operating at a good speed. Fixed route, they're spaced out and communicating with the other fixed route vehicles. So there's absolutely benefits in being able to do that. I think they can handle that more so in the future. I think you have to start now in planning for the city planners and for those groups to say, here's the benefit, not just for AVs, right, but for fixed route. If it doesn't exist today, if you can improve the flow of public transport with fixed route service, you can add AVs into the mix. And I think the biggest caution or the biggest challenge is going to be the speed of the AVs so that they can keep up with traffic. You don't want fixed route buses, articulated buses pulling around AVs because they're too slow. But I really believe that there's continued growth in that area. More speed is there. And I think it's very important. I think the adoption rate for autonomous vehicles in an urban environment improves by using the dedicated lane and leveraging V2X or DSR, more V2X technology or V2I, where you're trying to connect infrastructure elements specifically to improve the flow of the vehicles. But just watch out for the speed. That's the big issue.
Yeah,
Yep.
For sure. Thank you.
Yep.
And we've come to our last question for this session, also for Neil. So Neil, how will the 5G affect the future of AVs? Is it an important? Is it as important as the providers are saying? And which are the health problems that this technology may have on our population?
This is again, a lot of this stuff, a lot of people have different opinions on. My opinion is that of 5G. So I go back to data. Data is important. Data decision making is important. The quickness in which you can get data or send data through a network is going to be key. So the 5G service, and I brought up the example of our issue where we have 5G frequency overlapping a DSRC area, and it was causing some conflicts, even though they were on completely different frequency bands. We're working through, I would say, the earlier stages of testing and piloting out the speed of getting that data through a network, through a cloud environment, and through that process, and making sure latency is extremely small. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. But the greatest benefits of that 5G service is that the more data your vehicle can consume, and pulling in either additional traffic data, communications to other vehicles, in the area, whether it be with your own fleet of vehicles or whether it's, other passenger vehicles or other there, communication with emergency vehicles that are far enough away that you can allow that vehicle to then ensure it can move off to the site. So there's a traffic rerouting of vehicles. I mean, all of this data elements exist today kind of in our traditional city planning, but we're a bit slower in being able to reallocate our buses on different routes because the amount of data that's coming in is just hard to consume. And I think if you're trying to do it off of a cellular network, 4G is good. LTE, obviously, the 4G LTE is slightly better. I don't know, I'm not familiar with the communication programs. Lewis had mentioned that there could be a bit some connectivity areas in certain parts of Chile, but we have the same in the US. So 5G, once that's deployed, inherently increases the throughput of data and allows you to pass more data into the vehicle to be able to provide better decision making, but also communicate that data back out to either the positioning of it, the data that it's collecting, either to the control center, or if you're trying to pass it back to your on-demand service, or we know where the vehicles are at, and you can have more accuracy on that, so you can start pushing that back through your microtransit cityway product. I mean, 5G, the ability of having that communication greatly improves the number of decision-making elements that you can add to the vehicle, and that the vehicle can add back into the network, which I think really starts to build you your smart cities communication, where you really find more efficiencies of moving people and people being able to find the vehicles properly and quicker. So, and being efficient. So that's I really think the 5G is going to be, could be a game changer in that area and really improve areas.
Well, thank you very much, Neil, for your answers. All of them have been quite interesting, and we should have a lot of questions still for the future of AVs, and we'll know more about that with the pass of the year. So, well, let's see if this works. Yeah. So we've come to the end of the session. With this last couple of questions, we close this 6th session of the seminar series on autonomous mobility and the future of transportation. Once again, thank you very much to our guests for sharing their work with us. And thanks to the public for being part of these virtual sessions. We will soon share this recording of this talk, which will be available with the subtitles in Spanish on the IDB's Vimeo channel. Before we finish, I would like to mention our next session of this seminar series that will be held later today at 4 p.m. on Eastern Time or Chile time. The keynote speaker at this seminar will be Kara Kockelman, Dewitt Greer Professor at the University of Texas at Austin, with more than 160 publications about transport systems and mobility. She is currently focusing her research on shared autonomous vehicles, and she will present this time about the main impacts of this technology regarding economic, environmental, and land use aspects. I would also like to mention that the respondents of this session are Francisco Martinez, the Dean of the Faculty of Physical and Mathematical Science at the Universidad de Chile, and Chris Seagrass, who is the department head at MIT Urban Studies and Planning. Please scan the code on the site to register to this event, or click at the link that we should be sharing through the chat. So keep enjoying these side events of EcoMotion Week 2020 and the different seminars of this seminar series, and check our website autonomochallenge.org for more details about the next talks and the different events regarding our innovation challenge and the Latin American hub on autonomous vehicles and autonomous mobility that we are currently developing with the Ministry of Transportation, the Inter-American Development Bank, and Transdev, with support of OpenBHF and the Universidad of Chile. Please take care and have a great week. See you next time.